of the thalamus. It is concerned with emotions and memory. The amygdaloid bodies are believed to be concerned with aggression. The hippocampus, lying above the parahippocampal gyrus, is concerned with memory. The septum pellucidum is thought to be associated with pleasure reactions. The cingulate gyrus, the fornix, and the anterior commissure carry nerve fibers to and from other structures in the limbic system, as do the mammillary bodies, which are also vitally concerned with memory. These 8 areas make up the complete limbic system.
Okay. Did you hear some things there? Thing number 1 is aggression is near the limbic system. Why do you think that people get really angry and they act out in really strong ways? Because the aggression center of your body is right next to the emotional center. I mean, it's just boom, there it is. And you can all of a sudden throw something across the room if you get really, really angry, and you otherwise wouldn't do that. You can have sane people with a big mob reaction that will go do something if you whip them up into a frenzy. And so if you're a dictator and you want to go take out some other little country, you just make them the enemy and you just keep whipping them and whipping them and whipping them, and you can take average, normal, everyday, good people and have them do something atrocious. And we understand that. That's why. It's right there. On the bottom is the memory system. That's the hippocampus. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit. Is that people choose behaviors that make some kind of sense, but they're not super logical. And we'll talk a little bit about that in your memory system. But that little horn on the top there, that is the pleasure center of your brain. It's also closely aligned with where the hunger center is. And so what happens is that people will do things that bring them pleasure when they have a really strong emotional reaction. So they'll all of a sudden eat food if they like comfort food. They'll reach for something sexual if they want sexual pleasure. They'll reach for something druggish if they want drug pleasure. They'll go out and they'll hang out with people. You know, what are you doing there? You're eating M&Ms. Yeah, that's what it is. He's
pleasure.
I was thinking you were smoking was what that was. So, because this is like the joint thing that we used to have in the 70s. So that's what he was doing with his M&M. I'm going, are you smoking a joint back there? Is that you would end up reaching immediately for something that brings you pleasure. I mean, just boom, there it is. And then you'll look back and go, why did I do that? Why is that so strong in me? That's why. Pain, pleasure, right there, right close to each other. So when you're working with somebody who is greatly emotionally distressed and they want to rid themselves of that, they're going to need to figure out what they want to do by resisting some of this natural tendency to immediately go for something that makes them biologically feel better. Does that make sense to you? So kids that are acting out of control in school, parents that are acting all crazy, all of that is that they just can do it in less than a second because in some way they believe it gives them a benefit. It often backfires in the long run. They're like, oh my goodness, now I'm in jail. Or, oh my goodness, I don't have my best friend anymore. Or I just put something wicked on Facebook because I'm really angry about that. So there. And then I think, oh, everybody hates me now. And you find yourself coming back to normal when that strong level of emotion subsides, which is really kind of fascinating. Here's some more information on the limbic system. This is a little more technical. Are you going to give it to me? You're not going to give it to me.
Let's see.
The limbic system, which is concerned with memory and learning, is also believed to be primarily involved in emotional responses. Emotions are the conscious result of the interaction between the activities of the cerebral cortex, the limbic system, and the visceral organs of the body, which produce specific physical changes. A number of theories have been postulated to explain this relationship between the body and mind. The emotional responses of any individual are, however, also a product of his knowledge and experience. The anatomy of the limbic system includes the amygdaloid bodies, which contain both incoming and outgoing nerve fibers and may help to regulate emotions, particularly aggression. The fornix, a thick bundle of nerve fibers which forms the outgoing pathway from the hippocampus. The afferent fibers, which bring impulses into the dentate gyrus and the area of Allen's horn. The dentate gyrus, which lies within the hippocampal sulcus and although its function is not fully understood, may relay impulses in the hippocampus. The subiculum, a region of the cortex composed of up to 6 different cell layers and a multitude of nerve pathways. Allen's horn, which merges with the subiculum and contains ovoid and pyramidal cells, the function of which are thought to be associated with memory. The efferent fibers, which carry information out of Allen's horn to other regions of the brain. The hippocampus, which is composed of folded layers of cells and fibers and is associated with emotions, learning, and short-term memory. The parahippocampal gyrus, a highly specialized area of nerve cells concerned with memory pathways. The mammillary bodies, which have incoming and outgoing nerve fibers and acts as a relay station between the limbic system and the brain. And the septum pellucidum, which links the amygdala and the hypothalamus and is believed to be concerned with pleasure reactions.
Pretty complicated, isn't it? All to have an emotion. What I want for you to see is God has really wired us in a very complex way so that we can experience a rich tapestry of life. And when that gets hijacked, it can become really disastrous for us. Super complex. We don't really all understand it yet. We know that there are certain areas of our human experience that are located in the emotional center. Now, I am an analytical person, which means that if you say something to me, my emotional rise will be lower than somebody who is really much more emotionally expressive. Because I just look at that and I just really don't react to that. You know, I'm more of that Spock is my hero kind of a guy, rather than somebody who is like super emotional about things. I married my opposite, my polar opposite. And so if I don't react to something, sometimes my wife thinks I don't care. Well, the truth of the matter is that I actually care less, but it's not that I don't care at all. It's just that on a scale of 1 to 10, a 3 is the equivalent of a 7 to her. And so I will experience that level of movement inside of my amygdala, but it's not going to be as expressed. Now, my personality has a real danger zone in that it can become really, really angry. So if I don't get what I want, all of a sudden I can explode. And I will lose all the control. So anyone who has a controlling personality, if you reach that threshold, you can actually all of a sudden start acting in very uncharacteristic ways, emotionally. So if you know anyone who's going through a divorce, or any child that's kind of like me, that's analytical and more academic, and all of a sudden their parents go through a divorce and they become super angry, really bitter, they're really mouthy about things, their amygdala is flying all over the place, and they don't really have the skills to keep shoving that all back down or processing it. Because when you reach too much, it just spills out, and it spills out negatively. It never spills out positively, because we're less emotionally responsive. So if there's something really big and bad that happens in our lives, it usually comes out really, really big. In fact, my wife thinks that I have 2 emotions, nothing and anger. Nothing and anger. Because she asked me how I'm doing, and I say fine. And she's like, no, really, how are you doing? I'm really fine. What does fine mean? It means I'm like at a 1, I'm fine. And so I'll talk to her about something when I don't like something, and so she lumps every kind of negative thing into anger. And I know that she's got a tapestry of emotions because she expresses it all the time. And so for somebody like me, you could actually see that high level of distress a little bit easier. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the prefrontal cortex, and then I want to tell you a little bit how these operate, and then let you guys talk about this. The prefrontal cortex here is at the front of your brain, and this is the executive center. This is the part of your brain that allows for you to be logical and systematic, think about consequences, and move forward. Now, there's a little piece of brain research that's come out in the last 3 years that says that as far as brain researchers know right now, there's an area of the prefrontal cortex that does not mature until roughly age 25. And that area is the area that allows for an adult to accurately predict consequences. Accurately predict consequences. So a 12-year-old that's super all over the place, that can't think about one consequence later on in the day, does not have a developed area of figuring out predictive consequences, which is why moms and dads are that part of their brain. That's why we stand and say you cannot ride on the hood of a car while it is going down the road. You can't do that because you could get hurt. No, I shan't get hurt. I am the exception to the rule of physics. I mean, how many times do we see young people and young adults who exempt themselves from the laws of physics? Well, even insurance companies know this, because you don't get a break, guys, on your insurance and driving a car until you get to be married, or was it 25, something like that? And you can't even rent a car until 25, because nobody wants their vehicle in the hands of somebody that can't predict consequences. I mean, that's why that's there. So, college behavior can also be super crazy. And then people think, well, this is not what I really thought would happen. Of course not, because you're not thinking at all. What I have to do is borrow from your wisdom and make it my own until I have my own wisdom. If that area of my brain does not operate fully, then I have to borrow your wisdom. And when we're disconnected from our parents, or we're disconnected from wise people, then I'm left with my own experience, and I'm just going to do whatever it is that I want to do. So when you're looking at kids, there actually is a biological reason why they might struggle with the idea of you're really stupid, and you don't know what you're talking about. And then about 23, 24, 25, they come back and go, you're really pretty smart after all. There's a brain maturation that actually occurs at that time. So you have to keep doing the right thing. You never compromise safety, and you never compromise righteousness. Those are the two things that a parent or a leadership never compromises on: safety and righteousness. Because those are the two things that will be vindicated in the future. I'll change my methodology, but I will not change safety and righteousness. So a child, as a child ages, will begin to see that safety and righteousness are really, really important things. Okay, now this is the really cool part. You have this all down. Prefrontal cortex. Reasonable reaction, it's logical, it takes 6 to 8 seconds to respond, it's problem solving, and it's thoughtful. The amygdala has an overreaction. So if you're dealing with somebody and you think, oh my goodness, you're overreacting, we call that an amygdala hijack. An amygdala hijack, it's a spike of emotions, and it's not supposed to be logical. So if you interrupt somebody and they don't want to be interrupted, there it goes. If you're talking with somebody and they receive some kind of news and they've been working really, really hard at things, and all of a sudden it's one more, the straw that broke the camel's back, it's a complete and total amygdala hijack. And they're totally illogical. You can't talk to them. You can't talk them down. You touch them, they think you're going to hit them. They're just like crazy with that kind of emotional response. That's the amygdala. It takes less than a second to respond. It gets you out of trouble. This is your natural way that you can leave a place and have the courage and motivation to do that. This is your fight, flight, or freeze. So I want you to think about a rabbit. We have rabbits that come into our yard, and a rabbit is not by nature aggressive, by nature. But if I get too close to the rabbit, that rabbit will run away from me, he'll fly away, and then he'll stop in the middle of the yard, and he'll go like this. You don't see me. You don't see me. You don't see me. And when I get close enough to that rabbit will run to another part of the yard, and it will stop, and it will say, you don't see me. You don't see me. And we'll just freeze. But if I get that rabbit trapped in a corner, that rabbit will fight me. Bite, do whatever it needs to do. A rabbit has it has the flight, freeze, and fight that you can see. That's the amygdala. A rabbit does not have a prefrontal cortex. It just has that natural way of responding, which is why we call them wild. Because you don't know what they're going to do. There is no such thing as a tame tiger. Because a tiger does not have a prefrontal cortex. All it has is the amygdala. Which means that as long as you're making sense, and as long as the tiger is feeling good, and as long as the tiger is not threatened, then the tiger will act in tame-like ways. Because the amygdala is not going crazy with the fight. But you get too close to that tiger, or that tiger doesn't like something, or that tiger gets uncomfortable, and all of a sudden something will flash, and the handler will be attacked. And you'll read every once in a while about somebody that gets so used to a wild animal, and that wild animal turns on them. It's this response that's going on in the brain. It's a biological response that people forget about, because 9 times out of 10, or 9.9 out of 10 times, this is going to be really okay. Okay? So at the bottom here, I want you to look at this, the hippocampus here. Oops, I just messed up on this again.
Just pushed the wrong thing. Stop, next. Here, we'll just do that.
Okay, let me go back here. Let me show you this. This was really cool for me. This spot right here is the hippocampus, right underneath that brown spot that's down there. So it's right there in the amygdala, which is really, really important as you look at this. Now look at what this does. It stores options, typically past experiences, and it picks one that looks good even if it's not a perfect match. This is a different part of your brain. And what I want you to think about is that this is the brain that moves through responses immediately, and it picks something that it seems to make sense. I grew up in a family that was not physically safe. We didn't know if we were going to be spanked until my dad was done with a bare bottom and a belt. We didn't know if there would be a fight in the family. We didn't live in a real safe neighborhood, so I didn't know if I would be in a fight that day. Imagine having a high alert that you would have to live by. So if somebody came up and tapped me from behind, that was never a positive experience. I would whip around, and I would say that my natural tendency was to be defensive. So I learned that I had to stand against a wall, or I sat with my back to something, because if you came up behind me, I would actually shake if you did that. I had a girlfriend of mine once that came up and choked me from behind while I was in college. Choked me from behind, just to be fun. It's what a guy would kind of do. My fist was already turned around and was this far from her face before I realized what was going on. Okay, that's the amygdala. That's the amygdala. Okay, you've got the hippocampus that's right there, and it just is going to give you those immediate responses. So if you grow up in a family that gives you a whole bunch of really potentially negative options, then before you know it, you're saying stuff and you're doing stuff. Because that's what this is for right here. You just need to be aware of that when you work with people. It's so important that you see that so that you can help them to figure out what to do. What we have to do is insert new memories, new options in the hippocampus. And I want to tell you some really cool ways about how to do that. But I want to do the first one by the U.S. Cole. Do y'all remember the U.S. Cole?